Alright guys, so I got a couple different major updates that I want to get to here out of Israel and Gaza, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing that I got is Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who was recently speaking to the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he said, "We are looking into how to distribute the aid in Gaza through non-local entities because Hamas failed the attempts to distribute it through local entities. Private companies are also being investigated. As far as the state of Israel is concerned, there is no obstacle for the Gazans to leave. Maybe even the port they are building could be used for this, but there are no countries in the world that are ready to receive them." So here we have Benjamin Netanyahu, where it was recently brought to light that this port idea to build this like makeshift floating port maybe 60 days down the line that the Biden administration put out there to potentially facilitate some sort of trickle of aid into Gaza as they're in the midst of a looming famine. And it came to light that that was actually Benjamin Netanyahu's suggestion. And now we have Bibi coming out and basically saying, well, what if instead of using this makeshift port to trickle in aid to Gaza, as Israel is actively blockading a vast majority of the aid from getting into the starving population, what if we actually used it to ethnically cleanse Gaza and used it as sort of like a base of operations or a launch-off point to expel the Palestinians who are trapped inside of Gaza under this assault? So, kind of just saying the quiet part out loud here, right? And so we move on, because there's some other major things that I want to get to here. The Biden administration is split on suspending arms sales to Israel ahead of a deadline on Sunday. So this article was obviously published a couple of days ago, actually yesterday on March 20th, and it basically is talking about this letter that the United States sent to Israel or tried to get Israel to sign. That's basically just like a pinky promise that they're not violating international law, and then they signed the letter, and then the U.S. can use that bullshit justification to continue sending weapon shipments to Israel amidst this genocide. And, I mean, it's just a joke, guys. Here from the Times of Israel, U.S. official says Israel sent assurance that it is using the arms that we are giving them lawfully days before the deadline. Reports indicate that Yoav Gallant signed the letter last week, and the State Department has until May to assess Israeli guarantees and report to Congress under the new Biden administration requirement. So I'm sure, first of all, that this letter and these guarantees that Israel is going to send back to the United States, I'm sure that that's going to be truthful, right? Certainly, they're not going to continue with their track record of just rampantly, repeatedly lying about easily disprovable things to try to insinuate somehow they are following international law. Surely they're going to tell the truth here, right? No, of course not. I mean, this is all just, again, virtue signaling. It's meaningless. Joe Biden has the authority to end this war if he wanted to. And I'll show you guys this article that was written in Mother Jones detailing exactly how he has the power to do that here in a bit. But I mean, instead of actually using the material leverage that Biden has at his disposal over Israel, he's just doing shit like this, wagging his finger behind the scenes. Oh, we get all the a dozen reports every week. Oh, Biden's so mad behind the scenes about what Israel is doing. Oh, he wants them to help the civilians and let more aid in. But he's not using any of the levers that he has at his disposal in order to pressure them to fall in line. They just had, and I covered this yesterday, some heated phone call. And Biden was giving Benjamin Netanyahu warnings about the invasion that they're planning in Rafah. And Netanyahu turns around, gives him the double middle finger, and says, we're going to do it anyways. We don't give a shit what you guys are saying. And Biden says, oh, okay, I really don't want you to do that, but here's a couple $1 million more in weapons to use in that invasion. So this is all just meaningless. It's utterly meaningless. As if what? This letter that they're signing is a determination of whether or not they're following international law. They are not following international law, so much so that they're currently facing an active case at the International Court of Justice for genocide. Not at the ICC for some, here and there war crimes that may have been committed. Genocide. The most serious crime that a state can be accused of under international law. So you are doing the most extreme violations of international law, not just accidental things here and there. No, it's part of their war strategy. So the idea that this is even up in the air as to whether or not Israel is following international law is just, it's an absurdity. And it's not just me saying this, because guess what? Biden knows this. Of course he knows this. But now we have additional reporting in terms of how long ago he was fully aware that Israel was targeting civilians. So here is pointed out by Dave DeCamp. Biden knew Israel was bombing civilian targets back in October. We're now over 5 months from the October 7th attack in southern Israel and when they launched this most recent offensive. 5 months later, we get this information. Biden administration officials knew all the way back in October that Israel was bombing buildings in Gaza without having solid intelligence, that they were military targets, and continued to provide full support for the Israeli military operations anyways, according to this Washington Post report that he's giving a synopsis of here. The report said that a briefing took place at the White House on October 27th, 3 weeks into the brutal Israeli military campaign. Due to the sheer destruction in Gaza, it was clear that Israel was bombing the Strip indiscriminately, which is even, verbiage here that Biden has used on previous occasions, that the bombing has been indiscriminate. Well, what does that mean? If it's indiscriminate, that means they're violating international law. I mean, that's a one-to-one correlation there. Because if it's a targeted operation, and they're only striking Hamas militants and maybe some civilians were accidentally killed as collateral damage, then that could arguably be under the purview of international law. But if you are admitting that it's indiscriminate targeting that is killing a vast majority civilians, even a vast majority just women and children, if you're admitting that, then you're admitting that they're violating international law. I just covered yesterday, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, he went up on a podium and described how 100% of the population of Gaza is currently facing the stage 5 or phase 5 of starvation inside of Gaza. It's the first time in history that there has ever been an entire population of any given area that has been classified under this catastrophic stage of starvation with an immediate risk of outright mass death from famine. So how do you admit that that's what's happening and then simultaneously try to play this bullshit game about, well, we're trying to figure out whether or not they're violating international law? It's right in front of you. They say also that this report that I've covered on this channel from 972 magazine, published in November, revealed that Israel was actually intentionally hitting civilian targets. They say the Israeli intelligence sources told 972 that Israel targeted what it called power targets, which includes civilian infrastructure such as high-rise apartment buildings, banks, universities, and other public buildings. The sources said that the Israeli military would also approve strikes that kill large number of civilians in an attempt to target only one Hamas member. And so this is part of what the justification is that they give, right? They will literally go and flatten an entire apartment block where there could be dozens of civilians, and they'll say, well, we had some sort of a rumor or intelligence, whatever intelligence means in this instance, that a Hamas militant happened to be sleeping in one of these bedrooms. And so we just leveled the apartment building. And they think that that's somehow in accordance with international law. That means that the entirety of the surrounding area is now a legitimate military target. That's not how this shit works. And it's very clear what they're doing. When you're targeting mosques and churches and schools and UN shelters and refugee camps and university buildings, some of these university buildings, I've shown you guys the videos, they're doing controlled demolitions. It's not even just airstrikes or some of the sniper fire that we've seen at hospitals, for example. They're doing controlled. How do you explain a controlled demolition of a university building? Because if it's a controlled demolition, that means if there were, even hypothetically, Hamas militants in that building, then you've already cleared them out, right? Not to take them at their word that there were ever Hamas militants in any of these university buildings, but even if there were, you had time to go into the building, to rig a bunch of explosives, and then to leave, walk back, take a little cute TikTok video for yourselves and your soldiers, and then blow that shit up. That's a war crime, obviously. But we just see this over and over and over again, and nothing is ever done about it. They pretend as if we don't have the direct video evidence to prove that Israel is doing these things. They say Biden officials also acknowledged during the October 27th meeting that Israel had no clear plan on how to defeat Hamas, saying, quote, "We never had a clear sense that the Israelis had a definable and achievable military objective." Guys, this is almost word for word, bar for bar, what top American generals were saying during our years and years in Afghanistan. They never had a fucking plan. They never knew what they were really doing, what the clearly defined objective was, because there wasn't one. And that's exactly what Israel is now doing inside of Gaza, in terms of trying to go and eradicate Hamas, completely defeat Hamas's military apparatus. That is not happening. Okay, the US State Department, the US military, they've come out, they've done reports on this about how that's not a clearly identifiable or achievable goal. And so what are we supporting this for? I mean, if you're admitting this behind the scenes, then what is your justification for supporting this? They don't have any achievable military goals. The vast majority of the people they're killing, which you know is an intentional aspect of this war, are civilians. They're flattening civilian infrastructure with no justification, no solid intelligence. So what exactly are you supporting here? And this is why I constantly say that the Biden administration, the United States, fully complicit in this. There is no excuse. You don't get to stand behind some podium doing a press briefing and say, well, we hope that Israel is going to follow in accordance with international law. We hope that they are going to take into consideration the civilian lives that are being lost inside of Gaza. You don't get to do that when this is what you know behind the scenes, and then in public you're going out and supporting them and lying about it and talking as if they're following international law and this is just a targeted campaign against Hamas and it's unfortunate that civilians are dying, but it's war and what are you going to do? They continue. They have another quote saying, from the very beginning, there's been a sense of us not knowing how the Israelis were going to do what they said they were going to do. Well, here's the surprise for you guys. What Israel has been claiming they want to do is not and has never been what they've actually been doing. What they've been doing is targeting civilians. What they've been doing is trying to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. That's what they've been doing. They've been indiscriminately murdering civilians. Okay? So when they tell you that their goal is something other than that, and it completely contradicts with the intelligence that you're getting about what is actually happening on the ground, maybe, I don't know, something to think about there. The discrepancy between those two things. Maybe don't take them at their word when they're caught repeatedly lying over and over and over again. I mean, they say US intelligence has acknowledged since that Hamas is not going away. The annual threat assessment that was released publicly by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence this month said that Israel probably will face lingering armed resistance from Hamas for years to come. And despite the lack of a realistic goal and mass civilian casualties, President Biden still continues to provide unconditional military aid for the slaughter. Since October 7th, his administration has approved over 100 arms deals for Israel. And because he knows how much the American people disagree with him on this policy, guess what he did? Okay, he basically tried to do under-the-table deals and kept the dollar amount under a certain threshold so that he wouldn't have to make this publicly available knowledge. It was just because we got that report from The Guardian that was detailing how this was playing out that we found out, oh, he's actually on top of the billions we already give to Israel, on top of the additional billions he's trying to give to Israel right now. We've also been giving them hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons under the table without him ever coming out and admitting it. So this is what the Biden administration has been doing lately, guys. Meanwhile, inside of Gaza, as I mentioned the other day, Israel has once again, I don't know if this is like the third time, the fourth time, they've attacked Al-Shifa Hospital. So, I mean, keep in mind, remember that graphic that Israel put out about this massive, sprawling, underground tunnel network compound headquarters of Hamas that was apparently under the hospital? And then they go and they do this raid and they come out with like a box of dates and maybe like a couple guns that they found laying around. And they try to act as if that never happened. They try to act as if they were vindicated as a part of that. They have been raiding and bombing and attacking hospitals throughout the entirety of this. The vast majority of Gaza's healthcare network has been completely disabled, and the few remaining hospitals continue to be raided and attacked, like Al-Shifa was once again, and then, you know, the rest of the hospitals are not functioning at all. The ones that are, they're completely overflooded. They don't have enough medical supplies, if any at all, because Israel isn't allowing medical supplies into Gaza. And I mean, I've covered the stories of, 10 children a day who are losing limbs and having to have amputations done without anesthetic. This is the kind of shit that we're enabling. So I mean, here from Euromed Human Rights Monitor, to give you some of the absolutely disturbing details about this most recent attack, they say the ongoing Israeli massacre in Gaza City's Al-Shifa medical complex and surrounding areas has left at least 100 Palestinians dead, 100 Palestinians killed, in an attack on a hospital that they've already raided before. They say many of whom were victims of extrajudicial executions after their arrest. The international community must intervene immediately to put an end to this atrocity. Newly released detainees and eyewitnesses told Euromed Human Rights Monitor that the Israeli army forces have carried out unlawful killings and executions against displaced Palestinians inside the Al-Shifa medical complex for 3 days in a row, and that the military operations there are ongoing. One survivor, who asked to be identified as MK, confirmed that Israeli soldiers repeatedly took prisoners into the hospital's morgue area, and then gunshots were heard, and then the soldiers left without the prisoners. He said, "The soldiers detained me and handcuffed me in the hospital courtyard. I was left undressed for more than 9 hours. About 4 times during that period, I saw soldiers lead groups of detainees, always at least 3 and never more than 10, into the hospital buildings, particularly the morgue building, where the bodies had previously been kept." He then added, "Gunshots were heard, with the soldiers then leaving the area to bring another group there." So this would not be the first instance that we have seen of credible reports of field executions. This one happens to be taking place inside of a hospital complex. Field executions. And I mean, obviously, many of the people they're killing as a part of this are obviously civilians. I don't know if there's a single Hamas militant that they've killed as a part of some of these raids. Even if there was, it wouldn't justify continued attacks on one of the few remaining hospitals that's even semi-functional inside of Gaza. But like, just to give you another perspective, one of the people that they claimed they killed during some of these attacks on the hospital was like the head of the police inside of Gaza. And they killed him, and then they say, okay, well, this is one of the top Hamas like commanders, essentially. And this is part of their rhetorical strategy for attacking civilians, civilian targets, civilian workers that happen to work for the government but aren't part of the Hamas militant wing. They constantly conflate these things. This is why we hear all the time the Gaza Ministry of Health, or the Hamas-controlled Gaza Ministry of Health, is to try to make it seem as though anybody who has any connection to the ruling government of Gaza, even if they're not a militant, that somehow they are the equivalent to a Hamas militant that went into Israel on October 7th and committed war crimes. They just conflate all of these different things. And so they apparently killed one of the top remaining police. And in the meantime, this is even something that the United States of America has told them to stop doing, to stop killing some of these police officers inside of Gaza, because they're some of the people who are leading the charge in trying to facilitate the delivering of aid, some of the few, little aid that's getting into Gaza, facilitate the distribution of that to the civilian population in Gaza. And Israel's just ignoring that, just continues to do it over and over and over again. I mean, just some more perspective here from the World Health Organization on the scale of this. 410 attacks on healthcare since October 7th. 685 people killed in these attacks, 902 people injured in these attacks, 99 healthcare facilities affected, 30 damaged hospitals. There's only like 36 hospitals total inside of Gaza. 30 damaged hospitals. 104 ambulances affected. And you can see sort of the map of this. It's the entirety of the strip here. Whether it's in Rafah or Khan Yunis or the northern strip of Gaza, it does not matter. They've been attacking the healthcare system, the education system, the civilian government system, everything. Even like cultural sites have been under assault. Because again, the goal here is not a targeted operation to kill Hamas militants. The goal is to make the Gaza Strip unlivable for Palestinians. That's the goal. And it's so clear when you look at things like this. To have any other interpretation is just, it's a joke at this point. And so I'm going to finish off here. We got Karine Jean-Pierre, and then I'm going to show you guys this article from Mother Jones on what Biden could do. Here's the spokesperson for Joe Biden, who is giving one of the most half-assed, tired responses to a question about Joe Biden losing support from Arab Americans and just broadly losing support, for his actions in supporting the genocide in Gaza. And I mean, just look at her facial expression, look at her tone of voice, and the specifics on what her response is to this question here.
Majority of Palestinian American, Arab American, and Muslim organizations that the White House reached out to for a meeting this week rejected the invitation. So what is the White House strategy on this, and are there plans for the president to directly engage with these communities?
So look, the president, as you know, has had an opportunity to meet with members of that community not too long ago, leaders of that community, the Arab American community, the Muslim American community, not too long ago. And so, look, what I will say is we understand that this is a difficult time, that this is a painful time. We understand that the events of October 7th, that that killed more than 1,200 souls, right? Took more than 1,200 souls in Israel, and also took Hamas, the terrorist organization, also, as we know, took hostage more than 200 people. And what that led to, that war that led to, is incredibly painful. We understand that. And so, look, we're going to continue to, as you know, the president, senior officials from the White House met with members of those communities in Illinois just yesterday, and we're going to continue to have those regular meetings to hear directly from them.
Okay, so you're going to have those regular meetings, you're going to hear directly from them, and then completely ignore every single thing that they are saying. I mean, again, look at how she looks like she's about to fall asleep here, guys. We're talking about tens of thousands of innocent people that have been killed. Okay, with our weapons, with Joe Biden's direct complicity. And she didn't even answer the question, which was a question directed at the impact that this has had on the Arab American community. But guess what, guys? It's not just Arab Americans. It's not just people with family members in Gaza. It's a massive, diverse coalition of people who have been going to protests, who have been writing in uncommitted on their primary ballots. Okay? Millions of people across the country. I happen to be one of them. And I have no family in Gaza. I'm not an Arab American. I'm not a Muslim. Okay? It doesn't take being a certain part of those characteristics in order to be against genocide, believe it or not. And so his issue, politically, is not just with Dearborn, Michigan. This is a massive issue, especially with young people across the country. And they just seem to, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, not give a single solitary shit about it. How is that your response? She didn't even give some sort of like a false, virtue signaling sympathy about the amount of civilians that have been killed. She didn't even assign agency to Israel for killing 30,000 plus, 40,000 plus civilians in Gaza. She's asked a question about it, and she pivots to October 7th. I'm sorry, what about October 8th, October 9th, October 20th, the 5 months since October 7th that have taken place? Nothing to say about that, other than just, well, Hamas is responsible for it. Israel has no agency. They're just a itty-witty-bitty country. They're just doing self-defense. Sorry about it. That's all they have to say about this, guys. It's fucking pathetic. I don't know how you could possibly expect to make an attempt to win back some of the people who you have lost in a coalition that you need to win the 2024 election. They're not even trying. They are literally not even trying. So what would Biden be doing if he was trying? So here from Mother Jones, Noah Leonard. Great article. Go read the whole thing if you guys want to. What Biden would do if he were serious about ending the war in Gaza. So, I mean, a lot of this is stuff that I bring up all the time. But just a couple things here. Restrict arms transfers to Israel. So they say Levy and others agree that restricting arms sales is the most important step that the United States can take to influence Israel and to help bring the war to a close. The country's reliance on U.S. weapons is made clear by the fact that the United States has approved and delivered more than 100 separate military sales for Israel, almost one per day, since the war began. So this is a weird argument that I hear all the time. I've had people in my own comments on some of these videos that have brought this up, and they say, oh, well, it's just a tiny percentage of Israel's military that's actually funded by the United States. Why are we sending them almost one weapon shipment per day then, throughout the entirety of the last 5 months? Why are we doing that? The U.S. aid militarily to Israel is vital to their military capabilities, to continue what they're doing in Gaza. It's not just some throwaway thing and it wouldn't affect them at all. They give more details on it. They say, among other weapons, the United States has sent tens of thousands of artillery shells and thousands of unguided dumb bombs. It is not known just how many of them have been used in Gaza, but Israelis have not hidden the fact that these weapons are essential to the war effort. Quote, all of our missiles, the ammunition, the precision-guided bombs, all of the airplanes and bombs, it's all from the U.S., according to this retired Israeli major general. And he said this all the way back in November. He said, quote, the minute they turn off the tap, you can't keep fighting. You have no capability. That's not my words. Those are the words of a retired Israeli major general, somebody who may know a thing or two about Israel's military capabilities and how much influence and impact U.S. weapon shipments have over their military capabilities. So this is not some small thing here, guys. You turn off the tap, and maybe they can continue for a little bit, but if you turn off the tap, And you also stop rejecting ceasefires at the UN, and you allow for motions at the United Nations Security Council to go through, stop protecting them on the international stage, apply public pressure, even sanction them if you have to. I mean, we should have been doing that a long time ago, but you do all of these things, what they're doing in Gaza cannot continue. It logistically cannot continue. I mean, guys, the other part of this that is, it's almost like comical, is that, and I have many critiques of the U.S. handling of the war in Ukraine, and I've outlined those all on the channel. I'm not going to get into it here, but just imagine that you are some Ukrainian soldier who's like running out of ammunition, right, to try to fight off Russians that are coming into your country, and the U.S. is debating whether or not to send you another aid shipment. Maybe they won't, and then you're going to be possibly fucked. And in the meantime, as you're running out of artillery shells on the front line, the U.S. is turning around and emptying our stocks to send Israel artillery shells, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, to go and drop on the heads of Palestinian kids. I mean, it's just an absurdity. They say the president has broad authority to restrict weapons under U.S. law. They say this senior advisor at the International Crisis Group worked nearly a decade at the State Department as an attorney, and he said the process by which Biden could stop more weapons from being sent to Israel is simple. He tells the State Department, nope, pause the transfers, we're not doing it anymore. It's that simple, guys. It is literally that simple. Again, I'll link this entire thing down below if you want to go read more of the details, but they also point out he could just simply follow the law. Right, we have something called the Foreign Assistance Act, which is supposed to block the president from providing military assistance to a country that restricts access to U.S. humanitarian assistance. That is exactly what Israel is doing right now. Why do you think the United States is even floating the idea of building a port off the coast of Gaza? Because this is what Israel is doing. So this is against the Foreign Assistance Act. They also point out the Leahy Law, which I brought up multiple times before. It is illegal under U.S. law to send weapons to a country or individuals that are engaged in gross violations of human rights. That is Israel. Two different laws that you could look to say it's illegal for the United States under domestic law, not just international law, U.S. domestic law, for us to be sending weapons to Israel. And they just pretend as if this doesn't exist. This is why we're sending this fucking bullshit letter over to Israel to get them to pinky swear that they're not violating international law, is because if they were, and we actually admitted they were, then sending them more weapons is illegal. I mean, also, withdraw support for additional military aid. I mean, the $60 billion package that, for Ukraine, that also includes $14 billion for Israel, $9 billion in some humanitarian aid, and then for other parts of the world, as well as in Gaza. I mean, stop the additional additional military aid from going to Israel. That would be something else you could do. Part of this same bill, by the way, cuts funding to UNRWA. Cuts it. Codifies that into law. That we're going to continue putting a stranglehold on the only major organization that is capable of facilitating aid to the people of Gaza at a mass scale that is needed right now. We're still cutting that aid based on zero evidence provided allegations about 12 out of 13,000 UNRWA employees that they had some connection to October 7th. Other countries around the world have resumed funding to UNRWA, right? It was like Canada, the European Union, all these other countries. Canada actually just halted arms shipments to Israel. The United States is talking about passing a bill to give billions more to Israel and to cut funding to the Palestinians, who are currently in the midst of a famine. And, of course, they finish off support UN ceasefire resolutions. So, I mean, again, all my sources are always down in the description. If you guys want to go read more of that article, I do recommend it. But this is where we're at right now. We have the United States playing these bullshit back-and-forth letter games to pretend as if there's some possibility Israel is not violating international law, while continuing to ignore that you're violating not only international law and being complicit in a genocide, but also violating U.S. domestic law by sending these weapons to Israel. And in the meantime, we have this looming famine on the horizon. We have Israel going and attacking hospitals for the umpteenth time, okay? And then we also have this reporting that the Biden administration knew all the way back in October that they were intentionally targeting civilians inside of Gaza. And then Benjamin Netanyahu floating the idea of using the port that Biden is saying is for humanitarian aid to actually ethnically cleanse Gaza. So, obviously a lot going on here, guys. I'm going to continue to give you these daily updates, but it's just getting worse and worse by the day. And I really, unfortunately, do not see any sort of immediate end in sight. If anything, this is likely going to continue to escalate. It's likely going to continue to get worse. And so, I'll keep making these videos, guys, but it's depressing as hell to think about what my government is supporting right now. So, go ahead and like and subscribe and stay tuned for, I guess, more of this absolute clusterfuck.